As you can see, I have attached two stretchers. I attached the two stretchers that are on the back side of the stool, and I've done that for a reason. I'll explain why in just a moment. But one at a time, I drove those deck screws into the stretcher that I had clamped to the side of the table earlier. I did this one first, and without even moving the clamp that held the side to the table, I was able to clamp the second stretcher to the table and then drive these two deck screws. So I just had two stretchers, these two stretchers, attached to this side. Okay, and this is the tricky part. But you can see what I've done here. I've put a nice clamp, nice long clamp, in the middle. I don't know if you can see. You can now. The foot is resting halfway on and halfway off the side, because what I'm trying to do is keep things even. If I put the feet of the clamp all the way onto the step stool, you'll see what happens. It starts to flex, it starts to wave, it starts to toe in, and that is going to make it impossible for what I'm going to do next. So I've seated the deck screws into the other side of the step stool. And the reason I'm doing the side with the two runners or stretchers first is because once I have these two in, this becomes way more stable, and then I can place this stretcher and this stretcher. I might put them in between and then clamp together just to hold as I drive these deck screws into those stretchers. You can see I just barely touched this and it started to toe in. So this is a very precarious part of the assembly, but if you do it in the way that I just explained, where you clamp the stretchers to the table and get the two going that are aligned vertically, stacked up, top to bottom, it'll be a lot easier. So what I'm going to attempt to do now is just put the screws in, hopefully without knocking the clamp off. But it could very well happen. It could happen to you. And if it does, you just re-clamp. So I'm just going to give this driver little touches forward as I try to seat these deck screws into the stretcher. Here we go. Okay, that feels pretty good. I'm not going to drive it all the way in. I'm going to try and get the second one in. Again, I'm going for stability. Okay, it looks like I've got those both started. Okay, now we're going to add them up. Again, just have to be very gentle, very careful. I've got the stretchers flush with the top and the sides, and that way it's going to save me sanding at the end. You definitely want all your joining to be flush. Seating the two bottom deck screws here. And as I pull the trigger to screw this screw in, I'm also pushing on the drill. Otherwise, it just spins like that, and you can very easily get the screw cross-threaded, stripped I should say, and then the driver head does absolutely nothing and the screw will never go in, and it might never come out either. Let's see how my joining looks. Let's see if I have flushness on the back side. Not bad. Little crack. So what I'm going to do to tighten this up is forget the power driver now, and I'm going to use a screwdriver and just turn this by hand, and that will close this gap when I do that. You can see the little tiny gap on this one too. Maybe a little bit here. These look a little flusher. Well, there's a little gap I can see. You can see two deck screws. So with a hand screwdriver now, I'm going to close those gaps by just giving them a couple little turns. Now that I have two stretchers, take this clamp off. This thing's pretty sturdy now. Should be fairly easy to get these other two stretchers in. So one little trick I'm going to show you, instead of trying to hold the stretcher and screwing the screws these at the same time, I'm going to pre-seat these deck screws. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start them, but I'm not going to put them in the whole way. I just want to get them started so that they're there. They're available. When I put the stretcher in the middle, now I don't have to fumble around with a bunch of deck screws. And they are very close to ready to go. So I'll go ahead and put a stretcher one at a time, put this stretcher in. I'll do the same thing I did here on the other side, put the stretcher in. I'll clamp right here so that it doesn't move, and then I'll be able to drive these deck screws in as well as on the other side. Just very similar to what I did with the back end deck screws.